In this true crime documentary, we uncover the shocking case of Taylor Pomaski.
I love it. Thank you much.
You can look at the next bag. After food here. So there is one other bit of news then. So with putting us up in a house, you won't need to.
What?
We're moving back. That's why I'm here. I've negotiated it.
On the 26th of April 2021, Stephen Pomaski waited for a call that never came. It was a Monday. The kind of day his daughter Taylor would usually check in just to say she was okay and ask how everyone else was doing. She was the oldest sibling, the kind of woman who carried the weight of her family with both pride and tenderness. But that day, silence replaced her voice. No message, no call, just stillness. Concern quickly turned into unease. Stephen reached out to Leslie Mandeville, Taylor's mother, hoping maybe she had heard from her instead. But Leslie hadn't. Not a word. That's when she decided to call her daughter. She assumed Taylor would give her a simple excuse. Maybe say she got caught up with work or needed space. Taylor had a habit of pulling back sometimes when things got overwhelming. But when Leslie dialed her number, she was met with something they weren't used to. Taylor's phone was off, and that alone felt deeply wrong. Leslie didn't waste time. She called Kevin Ware Jr., the man Taylor had been living with, her boyfriend, her partner. Kevin's voice on the other end of the line was unsettling. He sounded strange, detached. When she asked if he had seen Taylor, he claimed he hadn't. Not since April 25th. That was 2 days before this very moment. Something about the way he said it didn't sit right. Leslie called the authorities, not just to report her daughter missing, but because Kevin's voice echoed with something off. Something more than just confusion. That night, officers arrived at Leslie's home to collect her statement. By morning, they were already in Spring, a quiet suburb tucked inside Harris County, Texas, knocking on Kevin's door. What he told the investigators only deepened the shadows. According to Kevin, Taylor had stormed out during an argument they had on April 25th. It happened at a house gathering. Friends were there. Tension rose. She left in a hurry, left her dogs. But then, as he claimed, a car pulled up. A vehicle filled with men. She got in, drove off, disappeared. On the surface, the story seemed ordinary. A disagreement between a couple. A woman choosing to walk away. Taylor was 29, old enough to make decisions, old enough to disappear on her own terms. That's what the investigators thought, at least in the beginning. But when they circled back to Leslie and told her what Kevin had said, her reaction shifted everything. She didn't deny they fought. What she couldn't accept, what made her voice crack and her face pale, was the suggestion that Taylor would abandon her dogs. That part was unthinkable. To anyone who knew Taylor, her loyalty to her animals was absolute. She never left them behind. Not once. Not ever. Maybe it sounded like a mother's dramatics, but the detective started to think differently. If Kevin hadn't seen Taylor for days, why didn't he contact her family? Why didn't he call the police? The only answers that made sense weren't easy ones. Maybe they had truly separated that night. Or maybe he didn't call because he already knew where she was. Or worse, he didn't need to ask. As investigators tried to untangle that night, thinking that maybe these early answers might shed light on Taylor's disappearance, they had no idea that this case, the quiet exit from a house in Spring, was about to evolve into one of the most jarring and complex mysteries the state of Texas had seen in years. More than 4 days had slipped by since Taylor Pomaski vanished, and yet inside the Pomaski family home, the tension was only building. Not just because their daughter was still missing, but because someone who should have been at their side, who should have knocked on their door or stood with them in their grief, never came. Kevin Ware Jr., the man who claimed to love Taylor, never showed up. Not once. All he did was call her mother and promise that he would use every connection he had to bring Taylor back home. It sounded generous. It sounded noble. But to Leslie, it felt rehearsed. There was something hollow in his words. Something that echoed more of image than intention. Kevin wasn't just a man. He was a former NFL athlete, a name recognized in the neighborhood. But instead of rolling up his sleeves and searching, His call came off more like a performance than a plea. It didn't feel like someone fighting to find a partner. It felt like someone desperate to protect a reputation. The family's instincts all pointed in the same direction. Something about Kevin wasn't right. But what none of them expected was that the investigators were beginning to look in a new direction altogether. Through a digital trail buried in Taylor's emails, the detectives found a name: Eric Zuliger. A message from Taylor had been sent to him just moments before she disappeared. In that email, she told him she needed to see him urgently, and that one detail aligned disturbingly with Kevin's earlier claim, that a car with several men had pulled up, and she left with them. If Eric had gathered a group and come to see Taylor that night, it could explain why others were involved, especially since Kevin, a man standing over 6 feet tall and weighing more than most, wouldn't be easy to confront without backup. Just like that, suspicion shifted. Kevin's story began to make a strange sort of sense. Eric now became the new focus. But what happened next surprised all detectives working on the case. When contacted, Eric Zuliger didn't hesitate. He came straight to the station. He showed them the email Taylor had sent. No one had even asked him to. When they asked about his history with her, he didn't dodge or dramatize. He said they had been in a serious relationship for 6 years. They had broken up, but it was mutual, and they had stayed close friends since. What he said next cut through the room. Eric described Taylor's relationship with Kevin as deeply unhealthy. He said she had confided in him about Kevin's behavior, that he had a reputation for reckless living, that he struggled with substance issues, that he had been suspended from his lead career due to violations. And Eric wasn't just talking. He had proof, texts, screenshots, messages that showed Taylor had made it clear. She was preparing to leave. She told him she was ending things. She was ready to move out of Kevin's house for good. Usually when an ex-boyfriend speaks poorly of the new one, it raises suspicion, but not this time. Because Taylor's family confirmed every word. They had seen the signs. They had read the same messages. They too believed that Taylor and Eric had remained close and respectful after the breakup. Now detectives found themselves back at the start. Kevin's story needed a second look. But this time, they weren't just going to listen to him. They wanted to hear from everyone who had been there on the night of the party. And when they did, they uncovered the first real crack. Several guests said Taylor hadn't looked well. Her face was pale, she seemed weak, and after a loud fight with Kevin, she went upstairs. That was the last time anyone saw her. No car, no crowd of men, just Taylor walking up the stairs and disappearing into a silence that would outlast the night. Worse than the contradiction was the quiet. Most of the guests, when asked for details, spoke with unusual restraint. Like they were hiding something. Like there was a truth too dangerous to tell. It was in that moment investigators stopped calling it a disappearance. They started calling it something else. Something far more troubling. The case was handed over to Detective Stephen Campos, who made a personal promise to Taylor's family that he would pursue every lead and do everything in his power to bring her back. But what Campos didn't know then was that someone else had made the same vow. Someone who had turned personal loss into purpose. His name was Tim Miller. Founder of Texas EquuSearch, a nonprofit specializing in locating those who have vanished, Miller joined the effort with his team. They searched ditches, fields, rivers, neighborhoods. They left no corner unchecked. But as the days became weeks, it became painfully clear to everyone involved. Finding Taylor wouldn't just be hard. It might already be too late. For more than 5 relentless months, Texas EquuSearch and the close friends of the Pomaski family refused to let the silence win. The search extended across over 100 miles. The effort wasn't just about distance. It was about heart. About a family new to Texas, still finding their footing in a state far from where 5 generations before them had called home. Fort Lauderdale, Florida. But no matter how far they reached, or how many voices joined the call, the result remained the same. No answers, no trace, and no Taylor. Just as despair began to settle in, something shifted quietly inside the Harris County Sheriff's Office. Investigators decided to widen the circle. They crafted a public appeal, urging anyone with any knowledge, no matter how small, to come forward. And through that call came a detail so strange it cracked open a new line of suspicion. A woman stepped forward. Someone who had been romantically involved with Kevin Ware Jr. during his time with Taylor. She claimed that not long after Taylor vanished, Kevin gave her a strange gift, his own dog and Taylor's dogs too. That revelation clashed violently with the story Kevin had told Taylor's mother. He had said Taylor took the dogs with her, which is against what he told the investigator in the first day. But now the dogs had resurfaced in the arms of another woman, one with intimate ties to him. This contradiction might have seemed minor to an outsider, but for investigators, it was a breach in the armor of Kevin's version of events. If he told Leslie that Taylor left with her animals, but those animals ended up in someone else's home, what else had he twisted? What else had he covered? As law enforcement prepared warrants to search Kevin's home, phone, and vehicle, the case took a sudden, almost cinematic turn. On June 11th, 2021, Kevin was arrested inside a shopping mall. Not for anything related to Taylor, at least not directly. A week before Taylor vanished, he had been caught in possession of banned substances and a loaded item he wasn't legally permitted to carry. He was initially released after his bail was reduced from over $100,000 to just $23,000. But then he broke the terms of his release. And that's what brought him back into custody. While Kevin sat inside Harris County Jail, unaware of what was unfolding beyond those walls, investigators moved forward. They combed through his home. They checked his car. But nothing they found inside the walls of his property directly pointed to Taylor's disappearance. No hidden items, no personal effects, no physical evidence. What investigators didn't realize at the time, what no report or warrant could predict, was that Kevin's arrest would set off something none of them expected. The moment he was placed behind bars, people around him began to talk. Friends, acquaintances, even those who had once protected him with silence. It was as if the illusion had finally cracked. And now the truth was slipping through the seams. The first revelation came from an anonymous caller to the tip line, a man who claimed he had been at the house the night of the party, the very night Taylor was last seen. According to him, Kevin wasn't just drinking. He was under the influence of substances that dulled his judgment and amplified his rage. He got into a heated argument with Taylor, one that escalated violently. The witness said Kevin didn't just raise his voice, he raised his hands. And then came the moment no one could ignore. When others in the room tried to calm him, to pull him back from the edge, Kevin reached for something hidden, a weapon. He held it up and looked them in the eye, saying, and here the man quoted him directly, "If anyone has a problem with the way I handle my business, let me know. I'll put a round in your skull." Not long after the first tip, another call came in that would change everything. A man, a former friend of Kevin's, said he had recently visited a shared acquaintance who owned a rural property. And there, on that property, he had seen the scorched ground of a recent fire. In the center of that charred earth, he noticed something deeply unsettling, a large bone that didn't look like it came from any animal. When he stepped inside the farmhouse, he saw something else, a skull. While investigators rushed to verify the location and gather a search team, the lab returned their first real breakthrough. Kevin's phone record showed a call made just hours after Taylor vanished. The number belonged to the owner of the very same farm where the bone was discovered, the same man the tipster had named. On December 14th, 2021, officers raided the farm. What they found left even the most experienced speechless.
It's found during the search for a missing spring woman.
What we have learned about the investigation into her disappearance.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Keith Garvin.
And I'm Christine Noel. 29-year-old Taylor Pomaski has been missing since April. KPRC2's Michael Lepardi is live at the Harris County Sheriff's Office tonight with new developments in this search. Michael?
Well, the sheriff has not released a lot of details yet. He says those remains still need to be identified, but investigators believe they're related to the case. Tonight, a possible break in the search for 29-year-old Taylor Pomaski. The Harris County Sheriff says remains were found in the northern part of the county as part of the investigation into her disappearance.
The medical examiner has determined that they are human. With the information in the investigation and everything, we're certainly optimistic it's Taylor, but now we'll just have to wait for positive identification.
Tim Miller is founder and director of Texas EquuSearch, which played a role in the search. He told us he couldn't share the location yet.
That's property that somebody does live on, about 1.5 acres, and again, I don't think that we're totally done with that area yet.
The sheriff's office says Taylor was last seen in April. Right now, the sheriff says investigators are unclear on the identity of the remains, but believe them to be related to her case. The sheriff didn't go into detail, but said the location was identified during the ongoing investigation.
Thank God they got information out there, good enough information to go ahead and obtain a search warrant. They got the search warrant, and, here we are today.
The sheriff is encouraging anyone with information on the disappearance to come forward as the investigation is still ongoing. Now, back in June, the sheriff's office told us that Taylor's boyfriend was one of several people they were questioning who interacted with her before her disappearance. I asked for an update on that today and if that has changed, but have not yet heard back. Reporting live downtown, Michael Lepardi, KPRC 2 News.
But it was now the job of forensic specialists to provide two answers. Was this Taylor Pomaski? And what exactly had ended her story? Detectives now had tangled narratives from Kevin, a timeline full of gaps, conflicting accounts, a farm that held answers, a witness who had seen the unseeable, and remains that, if proven to belong to Taylor, would turn a story of vanishing into something far darker.
Happening today, jury selection beginning this morning in the trial for ex-NFL player Kevin Ware Jr. on drugs and weapons charges. ABC 13's Charlie at City live in Montgomery County. As we remember Charlie, and many around the nation know Ware, for being separately charged with murdering his girlfriend Taylor Pomaski.
Yeah, Jacob, that's exactly right. And it's important to note the difference between the charges here. Today's trial is regarding the drugs and weapons. The other case regarding the murder charges, that is separate and out of Harris County. So today's trial is set to begin in just a couple of hours. And this really is the latest development in what has been several months of legal problems for the defendant, Kevin Ware. And so once again, today's trial is regarding drugs and weapons. And it all stems from an incident that occurred back in April of 2021. Ware was pulled over for speeding, allegedly going somewhere around 115 miles an hour. When a deputy searched his vehicle, a loaded AK-47 along with other guns and drugs like cocaine and meth were allegedly found inside the car. Ware is a convicted felon and was charged with possession of a firearm by a felon and possession with intent to deliver or manufacture controlled substances. And so Ware was out on bond for this incident when his 29-year-old girlfriend, Taylor Pomaski, disappeared from his spring home. Ware is now charged in her murder over in Harris County, accused of brutally murdering her and burning her body, which was later found a few months later in a ditch in North Harris County.
Confirming the identity of the remains took longer than anyone had hoped. The bones were in poor condition. Months of exposure and the intensity of the fire had damaged nearly every trace. It took over 2 months of forensic testing before DNA results confirmed what everyone feared. The remains belonged to Taylor Pomaski. With that, Kevin Ware Jr. was formally charged with intentionally ending her life. But even with this major breakthrough, a single question remained unanswered. How did it happen, and when? Witnesses had testified that after a heated argument with Kevin during the house party, Taylor went upstairs. No one had seen her after that, not a single soul. Investigators had spent months trying to get Kevin to talk, to say anything beyond denial, but he maintained his story. He claimed he had nothing to do with what happened to Taylor, that he loved her, that he would never harm her. What Kevin didn't realize was that he had already revealed the truth, not in an interrogation room and not to someone he trusted, but to a woman he had spent just one night with. A stranger. Someone he had invited into his world while under the influence of substances that dulled his inhibitions and loosened his grip on secrets. According to her sworn statement, which was later included in the official court filings, Kevin had been lying beside her, high and euphoric, when he opened up in a way that was both chilling and matter-of-fact. He told her that on the night Taylor disappeared, after she went up to her room, he followed. They argued again. He shoved her into the bathroom. Then, he struck her repeatedly in the head and ended her life by force. Once the guests had cleared out, he wrapped her in silence, carried her to his vehicle, drove to a remote farm, and set everything on fire. With that single confession, told in a moment of vulnerability and recklessness, Investigators finally had the missing link. They had conflicting timelines. They had physical remains. And now they had someone who could describe the final moments of Taylor's life in terrifying detail. But they still needed one thing: a confession from Kevin himself. When confronted again, Kevin stayed the course. He denied it all. He claimed the woman was lying, that the witnesses had misheard, that he was being targeted because of his past. But the evidence was too strong to dismiss, which is why the case was handed to one of Harris County's sharpest legal minds, Prosecutor Samantha Neck. She knew Kevin's background, his pride, his career, his arrogance. So when she entered the room to face him for the first time, she didn't waste time with sympathy or explanations. She played the game the way he would understand it, like a challenge on the field. "I'm going to play a match with you," she said. "You've got 30 minutes. That's the offer. You plead guilty and serve 30 years, or you take your chances in court and spend the rest of your life behind bars." Then she left the room. Kevin sat in silence. 20 minutes passed. He spoke with his attorney, measured the odds, weighed his ego against the reality. And finally, for the first time since Taylor vanished, he folded.
Also new at 4, a former NFL player will spend 30 years in prison for murdering his girlfriend and tampering with her body. Kevin Ware pled guilty today in Harris County to the 2021 murder of Taylor Pomaski. Court documents say that he hit her with a blunt object, strangled her, then dumped her body in North Harris County. Her remains were found 7 months later. Ware was a tight end for the 49ers and Redskins and had attended Klein Oak High School.
The disappearance of Taylor Pomaski wasn't just a case of someone vanishing. It was a slow unraveling of secrets, betrayals, and moments of silence that spoke louder than any words. Behind every unanswered call and every broken alibi, a darker truth was waiting to surface. Taylor was a young woman with a full heart and a future she never got to live, a woman whose trust was placed in the wrong hands. What Kevin didn't realize is that justice doesn't burn with fire. It doesn't disappear with lies. It lingers, and it waits. And in the end, it caught up to him. Not because he confessed to the law, but because he couldn't control his own darkness. Today, Taylor's name lives on, not as a tragedy, but as a reminder that those who hide the truth may escape for a while, but never forever. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime documentaries. See you in the next video.